Hello and welcome. I'm Anjay as ever, and this is the Valeton GP200 Junior again. A few weeks ago I did a first impressions. I promised an in-depth review. I'm probably not going to do that. I'll explain why in a moment. But I also promised you a live impressions review as well. So I was able to take this to a gig recently. Here is a little clip of me playing. Yes, I know, very showy offy, but I like that clip. And I thought to talk to you about how this performed. Now, this is the board that I used. So you'll see I've got Boss OC5 octaver. I've got a JSA hot toddy. It's kind of like a Timmy. I have an EQ pedal, which is for solo boosts, and then I've got the Valeton. The way this is set up is I have 3 patches that I'm using in stomp box mode. So each one of these buttons is assigned to a different effect in the chain. I then have an amp simulator running. Then at the gig I had the left XLR running to the PA, and I had the right sort of standard output running to my amp into the return of the effects loop. So that's kind of how it was all set up. Now, it sounded fantastic. You know, with or without the amp running, it sounded like there was a real amp playing in the background. No one thought I wasn't playing an amp, let's put it that way. So, you know, all this thing about running modelers live, no one notices, no one cares. As long as you sound good, no one really cares what you're running. So from that perspective, it was absolutely fine. From an actual usage perspective, it was really easy to use. So on every patch that I set up, this button was assigned to distortion, this assigned to a modulation, and this assigned to delay. So I'm just running through the amp, so you're just getting phone quality now. So far, so easy. I then have a reverb running as well as some compression, just sort of set up always on. And then this is my default phaser set. If I then run it across this way, I have a flanger version, which is exactly the same, but has a flanger running. And then if I go through a couple more, I have an octaver, which I didn't use. I'll explain why in a second. Then I have an acoustic patch. So each one of those was used differently during the gig. The ones that I sat on mostly was probably the default flanger. Actually, that's my favourite. Now, the other cool thing is that each of these knobs can be assigned to one of the effects and one of the knobs that you'd have on the effect. So this one was assigned to the gain of the distortion pedal. So this one's assigned to the gain on the amp itself. And then this one I think is assigned to the rate on the flanger, possibly. So that meant the settings that I normally have to change during a gig were accessible to me immediately. So why all the other effects? Well, let's start with the octaver. So if I move to the octaver, now you might not be able to hear it, but there is actually a latency on it. Now it's it's very good. The octaver is incredibly good for tracking. there is a latency, so it sounds like it's doubling the whole time. Which makes the effect really obvious, and I don't use the effects in that way. So what I have is I have it almost always on with the tracking set so that it only affects the lowest two strings normally. And then a little bit on the upper octaves. Now, it's very subtle, but when I'm in a band which has only got a bass and a guitar, as well as singer and drummer, it just fills out the sound a little bit. And it doesn't have that latency. So all of the pitch effects on this have some level of latency. It's not normally too much of a problem, but for me personally, wasn't my favourite thing. And then why an overdrive pedal? So this overdrive pedal is a very, I'll just put it into 12. So it's not a big distortion pedal or anything, but it's just a little of extra drive. And the reason for that is twofold. First, the amp sim, whilst very, very good, isn't perfect. So it doesn't respond brilliantly to the volume on the guitar. It's not bad, but it's not as good as an analog pedal can kind of imitate. The other thing is that the pre-effect, so you have the ability to use like a boost or kind of a light drive pedal as a pre-effect, where I have currently got my compressor. I found a lot of digital artifacts. Now again, you won't be able to hear it if I record it and play it, but when you're playing it loud, you can hear that it's kind of got a weird, almost bit crusher thing happening at the top end of it. And I found that on all of the boost type pedals that are built in. So for me, again, probably no one would notice, but for me, it was a problem. And again, didn't respond quite as well as the volume control as an analog pedal. So that's why there's an analog drive pedal on here. And then this is just a solo boost, purely because I don't have enough buttons to include one that is just a go louder button. That's all this does, is just amplifies. That's all this does. It just pushes the amp sim a little bit more. So if I set it, just for solos. And then this was just set as a volume pedal, and then when you push down as the Crybaby wah. It was fantastic to use because it's so easy to set up and make quick changes on the fly that it was just like having some individual pedals on the ground. Only thing that caught me out was, as I was splitting the signal between the XLR out and the standard 1/4 inch out, what I didn't realise was, and I don't know if this is a bug or something, when you turn the tuner on, it only mutes the signal going to the amp. It doesn't mute the signal going to the PA. Now, if I unplug the amp from it, it was fine. So it's something about splitting between the XLR and the standard outputs. The mute on the tuner seems to get bypassed. So when I was tuning up, you could always hear me through the PA. That was a bit irritating. It's not a deal breaker, but it's a little bit annoying. And hopefully, in a future firmware update, we'll get that sorted. But to be honest, it was great. It was just because the way I set it up, so it was just 3 stomp boxes. It was just like having lots of stomp boxes available to me with a few extra sort of fun sounds. I think I've got one that's a bit more, there's a clean on here that I use on one song. That's a bit more dreamy. But other than that, I was just using the flanger version or the phaser version for different songs. And it was just, as I said, like having stomp boxes. So all in all, this is a great pedal to base a pedal board around. What I have here will suit me for any gig that I do coming up in the future. The drive pedals may change, the octave probably won't. But this unit here, do you know what? Really impressed. Sounded great, easy to use. Really, really happy with it. So if you're looking for a small form, giggable multi-effects, keep in mind you don't need all of this. It's just how I play and how I run. I needed these things for myself. I could probably do the gig with just this. No one would really notice. I would, but no one else would. So for a small giggable grab and go multi-effects, really do recommend this. It's a fantastic pedal, and it will be on this board for a while to come because it's like having lots of effects on different stomp boxes without needing to have a massive pedal board. So yeah, loved it. Did the job nicely. No complaints that are deal breakers. Let me know what you think. I'll put another clip now. Of me playing something else. Let me know what you think. Like, subscribe, and again, thank you to Valeton for sending this out. It's the support of companies like Valeton that help little channels like myself keep going, because it can be really expensive to keep buying pedals to review. So getting stuff sent like this is really good. But always remember, you'll always be getting an honest opinion. If this was rubbish, I would tell you it was rubbish. It's not. It has a few flaws. I've highlighted it, but it's a great pedal. So like, subscribe, and I'll see you again soon. Cheers.